Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you're new here, my name is Danielle, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about what it actually means to ignore the 3D reality and also how to do it in, from my perspective, the most productive way you can do it. Now, when it comes to this idea of ignoring your 3D, we hear all the time, right? You just keep persisting and you ignore what's happening in your 3D reality and you just persist in the end state or the state of the wish fulfilled until you see the reflection in your physical reality, right? And I would make the argument that that perspective when it comes to manifesting can be very effective. But what a lot of people, I think, misinterpret when they hear the phrase ignore your 3D reality is feeling like they have to put blinders on, like they have to basically walk on eggshells or pretend what's actually happening isn't happening in order to manifest what it is that they want. But like I said, when it comes to this idea of ignoring the 3D reality, I would make the argument that this perspective is not the most productive way to think about ignoring your physical experience. In fact, the way that I personally see ignoring your 3D reality is not so much about walking on eggshells, worrying about whether or not you're doing things right or wrong. It's actually more about seeing and acknowledging what's happening in your physical experience and consciously not letting it bother you anymore, especially as you're persisting in your end state of consciousness of already having what it is that you want. And the difference between these two different mindsets or perspectives when it comes to ignoring your physical, like the circumstances that you don't prefer, is actually in the understanding that the 3D reality is a past projection of your old state of consciousness, or a delayed reflection, essentially. In other words, as Abraham Hicks puts it, the 3D reality is old news. And so when you actually approach ignoring your 3D reality or the set of circumstances that you do not like or prefer from this perspective, what you're actually doing is you're understanding that the 3D reality doesn't actually matter anymore because it's the old frame of reality. It's actually the frame of reality where you received the wanting of your manifestation in the first place, where you actually perceived lack of it. Your goal isn't necessarily to stay in this frame of reality where you're lacking your manifestation. Your goal is to notice the lack and then use that contrast to shift yourself into the version of self who already has what it is that they want. And then your 3D reality, which is just a mirror, will reflect you back to you. But the whole point I want to make here is that when it comes to ignoring your 3D reality or your current set of circumstances that you may not prefer, the goal isn't necessarily to pretend that they don't exist or that they are not there, at least at first. The goal is to actually look at those circumstances, validate their existence because you don't accidentally want to resist them. And then you want to consciously remind yourself that those circumstances are old news. They are projections of your old state of consciousness, or in other words, they're part of the old frame of reality. And once you're able to see those sets of circumstances or that 3D experience as old news, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to consciously not let those circumstances bother you anymore. But the name of the game of this art of ignoring your 3D reality or the set of circumstances you don't like is actually maintaining a certain level of self-awareness and also being aware of what you're saying in relationship to those circumstances. And so, like I said, the goal is to not necessarily pretend they don't exist because that can sometimes cause unnecessary resistance. The goal is to actually look at those circumstances and not let them bother you anymore. And for the record, this isn't to say that you have to make yourself love your circumstances or make yourself happy when you're not actually happy about your sets of circumstances. It's more about looking at those circumstances, acknowledging whatever you feel about those circumstances, like letting yourself feel what you got to feel about them, but also being aware of the fact that those circumstances don't have to dictate what you can or cannot manifest. And then the last thing that I want to mention when it comes to this art of ignoring your 3D reality is actually talking about this idea of being fearful of certain potentials, or in other words, seeing a set of circumstances that may be telling you that something's going to happen just because of the nature of the circumstance. Like maybe even someone just comes up to you and is like, yeah, you're going to, I don't know, some unfavorable thing's going to happen, right? You have a certain set of circumstances that is telling you that a potential reality is likely to happen. I have personally found that a lot of resistance can come from this. And what a lot of people struggle with isn't necessarily pretending or not letting the circumstances bother them. It's actually about not letting their imagination run wild with potential realities that they do not want to experience. Remember, in every single given present moment, you have the power to change the trajectory of the events. And so what has really helped me personally when it comes to this situation, we could say, with, being fearful of potential realities and like feeling like you can't ignore your current set of circumstances because you're so scared of something potentially happening that the set of circumstances is telling you is going to happen, what can be really helpful is actually learning how to ground yourself in the present moment, acknowledging that as a potential reality, whatever is happening in your imagination or whatever the circumstance is telling you is going to happen, grounding yourself in the present moment and acknowledging that potential reality, but reminding yourself that you are God of your reality. It's all about being in preference mode. It's not about getting rid of that potential reality or pretending it doesn't exist. It's actually learning how to ground yourself, center yourself, get back into your preference mode or your God state of consciousness, creator mode, as I like to sometimes call it, and actually reminding yourself that that potential reality does not actually have to happen. And something that can be very helpful to release the resistance to that reality so you don't accidentally keep persisting in it accidentally is actually finding ways to survive that potential reality. Now, I know that's not the most spiritual thing in the world to survive, right? Like obviously, like people are going to argue like, oh, that's like an ego structure, right? But that has actually helped me really get through and not worry about potential realities when certain circumstances come up in my physical experience. The more you can ground yourself in the present moment, remind yourself that you are God of your reality, acknowledge those unfavorable potential realities, and as a form of releasing resistance, like acknowledging that even if that reality were to happen, I would find a way to survive it. Just doing that gives you the power back. It gives you the ability to take your attention off of the unfavorable because you know you'll be okay no matter what happens. And it helps you put your attention on what you do want to experience or the state of consciousness that you do want to assume or the reality that you do want to experience. So that can be very helpful when it comes to ignoring your current set of circumstances or your 3D reality or whatever you don't prefer in your physical experience. The way you can find a way to not let it bother you anymore or not let the set of circumstances bother you anymore if you are struggling with the potential reality problem or thinking that like, oh my gosh, like what if this thing does actually happen? Like how am I going to like, what if this happens? Does that mean I'm a bad manifestor? Instead of spiraling in that way, acknowledge the potential reality that could come from a set of circumstances. Put yourself back in your power seat. You are God of your reality, and this reality does not necessarily have to happen just because you are aware of it. In your imagination, as a form of releasing resistance, find a way to survive that potential reality. And once you feel secure in your ability to just be like, you know what, if this thing happens, if this reality happens, it's fine. I will survive it and I will keep persisting. That's when you have actually broken through. That's when you're going to feel a level of relief. And that's also going to be when you start feeling like you can actually persist in your new state of consciousness without necessarily freaking out about or worrying about your current set of circumstances that you may be dealing with. All right. So this can be a very helpful tip for anyone out there who may be struggling with something like that. All right. But with all that being said, I intend that this video helps someone out there. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, everyone, keep creating and I will see you in the next video.